Welcome back, everyone, to the channel Confessions of the Elderly. My wife quit her job to be a homemaker, and following my mother's advice, I cut off the Tet gifts for her family. On the first day of Tet, I went to visit her parents to offer my greetings. When I looked into the yard, I was stunned by the scene before me. My name is Din Phuc, and I am 33 years old this year. If anyone asked what I regret most in this life, I wouldn't say it was the times I lost money in business or made wrong decisions at work. What haunts me the most is that I once looked at the woman who shared my bed with such contempt, just because she was a housewife. Some mistakes don't come from being truly evil, but from the belief that you are always right. I was once like that too. I used to believe I was the sole pillar of the family, the one carrying the entire burden, and that my wife was just someone in the background, enjoying the fruits of my labor. It wasn't until the first day of Tet that year, as our car turned into her parents' yard, that I realized how wrong I had been. So wrong that I just wanted to turn back time and slap myself a few times. But before telling you about that day, I have to start from the beginning. I work as a chief accountant for a construction materials company in town. The job isn't exactly prestigious, but it's stable enough for outsiders to see it as a respectable position. My monthly income is over 20 million Vietnamese dongs. If no unexpected expenses arise, it's enough to provide for a small family and save a little. Because the money I earned was relatively stable, I always assumed I was the one supporting the whole family. My wife's name is Hong Lan. Before we were married, she worked as a sewing line manager at a private factory. She isn't the type of woman who is strikingly beautiful or particularly eloquent. She is quiet, speaks little but does much, always diligently focused on her work. Back when we were dating, I was so proud to have a hard-working girlfriend who was thoughtful and never demanded material things. The day Lan announced she was pregnant, I was so happy I didn't sleep all night. But the joy didn't last long when the doctor said the pregnancy was fragile and she needed absolute rest during the first months, avoiding work stress. That day, Lan sat in front of me, her hands clasped tightly together, and softly said, "Phuc, I'm thinking of taking a few months off work. The doctor advised that if I keep working like this, it won't be good for the baby." I didn't think much of it and immediately nodded. Yes, the baby is the most important thing, you should take the time off. At that time, I truly loved my wife, telling myself that it didn't matter if I had to work a little harder. Every afternoon after work, I would stop to buy some good food to bring home. Every night, I would ask if she was tired or if she needed to see the doctor. Seeing Lan holding her belly and walking slowly, I only wished for her to be healthy so everything would go smoothly. Our son was born healthy, to the great joy of both our families. For the first 3 months after the birth, I still kept the mindset that I had to try harder so my wife could focus on raising the child. But as time went by and our child grew stronger, Lan still hadn't mentioned going back to work. It was then that some inappropriate thoughts began to surface in my mind. Every day, I went to work from morning until evening. Coming home, the familiar sight was always Lan in her house clothes, hair tied up, holding the baby with one hand while tending to the cradle or busy in the kitchen. Instead of seeing my wife's hard work, I only saw a woman staying at home. I wondered to myself, the baby is over 4 months old now, how busy could it really be at home? So many other people manage to both work and raise their children, don't they? Those questions kept increasing day by day. I started to pay attention to every single family expense. Money for milk, diapers, electricity, water, and groceries. Everything came out of my salary. Lan never asked me for money, but she never contributed any either. Every time I returned from work, she would just smile gently and tell me, "Today, our baby started rolling over. Today, our baby laughed so much. Today, the baby slept soundly all session," while selfish thoughts were racing through my head. Does knowing how to roll over help pay the electric bill? Looking back now, I feel ashamed of myself, but back then, I completely failed to realize that I was in the wrong. Things only got worse once my mother started coming over to our house frequently. My mother's name is Bitch. She is a hard-working woman who has sacrificed her whole life, but she firmly believes that a son must be the breadwinner, while a daughter-in-law must sacrifice and stand behind her husband. In her eyes, a good woman is one who never lets her husband worry about anything at all. Every time she visited, she would look Lan up and down. Seeing Lan holding our child, she would shake her head and make a comment. Back in my day, 2 months after giving birth, I was already out in the fields, but you ladies have it so easy now. Lan just gave a light smile. Well, times have changed, Mom. My mother curled her lip. Changed how? The only difference is that you're lazier. Lan didn't argue back. She just silently continued to come for our child. And I sat right there, hearing everything, but I didn't say a word to defend my wife. Deep down, I even started to feel that what my mother said was somewhat true. Once, my mother saw Lan order a few spools of ribbon, some fabric, a few paper boxes, and some craft supplies. She frowned and asked, "Why are you buying these things?" Lan replied naturally, "I'm taking on some craft work at home to keep myself busy, Mom." My mother sneered, "Keeping busy, or just spending your husband's money? How much could those little trinkets possibly earn? You're probably just losing money." Quote, Lan just gave a sad smile, then held our child and walked into the room. I watched her go, but I didn't even bother to ask anything more. In my mind at the time, what could a few craft items really amount to? I assumed my wife was just doing it for fun, earning a few pennies that weren't worth mentioning. After all, the one truly supporting the family, the one carrying all the expenses, was still me. It was precisely because of those thoughts that the distance between Lan and me grew wider, without me even realizing it. I started to feel that every cent spent on my wife was a burden, and the words my mother spoke had, at some point, gradually become the truth in my mind. And then, there was just over a week left until Tet. A single remark from my mother caused me to make a decision that, even now, whenever I remember it, my heart aches as if it were being crushed. That year, Tet approached with a very strange feeling. Outside, people have started hanging lights and selling flowers and holiday treats. Every house is bustling with the sounds of cleaning, kids trying on new clothes, and adults reminding each other to buy this or that. But in my house, the closer it gets to Tet, the heavier the atmosphere becomes. It's not because we are too poor to afford a celebration, but because my head is just filled with numbers. As soon as my monthly salary hits, I'm already calculating all the expenses, including formula for the baby, diapers, utilities, Tet market groceries, gifts for both sides of the family, and lucky money for the nieces and nephews. Looking at the long list in my notebook, I let out a sigh. Back when Lan was still working, even though she didn't give me money directly, she would occasionally buy household items and cover smaller costs herself. But since she stopped working entirely, I've just assumed that every penny spent is my own. Just as I was feeling overwhelmed, my mother called, and the moment I picked up, her voice rang out clearly. "Fuck, Tet is almost here. How are you planning to provide for your parents this year?" I hesitated for a moment and replied, "Yes, I'm working on it." "Mom, there are just so many expenses this month." My mother immediately clicked her tongue. "Expenses are expenses, but you must still treat your parents' side properly. You are the eldest son. Don't let the relatives look and say you got married and forgot about your parents." Hearing the words, eldest son, my heart felt even heavier. Since I was little, I have been used to hearing that phrase. As the eldest son, I must take care of my parents, set an example for my siblings, and make the relatives respect me. My mother knows my weakness very well, so whenever she needs something, she always brings it up right there. She started listing off a series of things she needed me to buy. A bottle of fine wine for my father to treat guests, a box of supplements for her aching legs, and lucky money envelopes for the cousins, making sure they aren't too small to avoid losing face. I listened and took notes, feeling more and more restless inside. Adding those costs together, it is not a small amount. I let slip a complaint, "Mom, I have too much to worry about this year. A newborn baby, I'm the only one earning money, so I'll probably have to cut back." My mother was silent for a few seconds, then immediately asked, "So, how much are you planning to give to your in-laws?" I answered honestly, I was thinking of giving Lan's parents the same amount as every year. They love their grandchild, and it's only right to show some respect for the holiday. Unexpectedly, my mother scoffed over the phone. That laugh sounded very faint, but it made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. If her parents love their grandchild, it's because it's their own grandchild. There's nothing to boast about there. Their daughter has been living off you all year. And you're still planning to give them more money? Fuck, don't be so soft. I frowned but didn't say anything. Seeing my silence, my mother continued, "I'm telling you, if her side of the family had any sense, they should be the ones sending gifts to thank you this Tet. You're supporting their daughter and their grandchild, yet you still have to give them money. Are you raising both of them?" Her words were like a stone thrown straight into the murky pond of my heart. If it were before, I probably would have thought she was exaggerating. But at that moment, after months of thinking I was carrying the whole family, I found her words strangely reasonable. I didn't think about how hard Lan's pregnancy was, how difficult the birth was, or how she didn't get enough sleep taking care of the baby day and night. I only looked at a very shallow truth. She didn't work, and I had to spend money. My mother lowered her voice as if she were teaching me an important lesson. This year, just cut the allowance for your in-laws. A basket of snacks and some fruit is enough. You have to make them understand that you aren't an ATM. A man who doesn't know how to keep his purse strings tight will sooner or later be led around by his wife's family. I sat still for a long time after hanging up. In the living room, Lan was pacing back and forth with the baby, who was fussy, face flushed, and arms flailing. She patted the baby's back while humming a lullaby. Her voice was soft and tired, but I didn't see that exhaustion. I only saw her faded house clothes, her hastily tied hair, and the appearance of a woman who no longer went out to earn money. That evening, once the baby was asleep, I decided to talk. Lan gently placed our child in the crib, while I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep my voice steady. Lan, I don't think I'll be sending any Tet money to your parents' place like we usually do this year. She froze for a moment, then turned to look at me. What do you mean? I avoided her gaze and replied, I'll just buy some sweets and a token red envelope for appearances. Our household expenses are mounting, and I'm carrying it all alone. I'm really exhausted. Lan looked at me for a long time. Her eyes held no anger, no blame, just a stillness that made me feel uneasy. She asked softly, Is this your idea, or your mother's? That question made me instantly annoyed. I frowned. Whose idea it is doesn't matter, does it? I'm doing it because I think it's reasonable. You have to understand our situation too. You've been out of work for nearly a year. Just because I don't say anything doesn't mean I'm not under pressure. Lan leaned down to adjust the thin blanket over our child. She didn't argue, didn't cry, and certainly didn't raise her voice as I had expected. She just said very slowly, Fine. If you think that's fair, then I won't push it. That very calmness only made me more frustrated. I had prepared a whole list of arguments in my head to counter her if she complained. But she didn't. She accepted the hurt like someone who had seen it coming all along. That left me feeling both unsettled and defensive. I stood up and dropped a cold remark. It's good that you understand. That night, I slept with my back to my wife. I thought I had done the right thing, both saving money and maintaining my position as the man of the house. Lan, however, lay beside me for a long time without moving. Near dawn, when the baby stirred and whimpered, I heard her get up to hold our child. In the darkness, her lullaby was steady, but for some reason, it sounded sadder than usual. At that moment, I didn't know I had just pushed my wife another step away, nor did I know that the Tet money I cut was nothing compared to the truth awaiting me at her parents' courtyard on the morning of the first day of Tet that year. The air was cool, a chill not as biting as the final days of the lunar month, but enough for one to clearly sense the scent of Tet in every breath. Outside in the alley, children called to each other, their voices mingling with the sound of motorbikes and the lingering memories of New Year's Eve fireworks. I woke up early, put on the new shirt my mother bought before Tet, stood in front of the mirror to adjust the collar, and then looked toward the bed. Lan was sitting there holding our son, nursing him while gently patting his back. She wore an old cream-colored sweater, her hair tied back, with no sign of resentment or reproach on her face after I told her I was cutting off the money for her parents. That very calmness made me feel even more annoyed. I kept getting the feeling that Lan was trying to act noble just to make me look small. Thinking this, I told myself I hadn't done anything wrong. I earned the money, and since times are tough this Tet, being a little thrifty is only natural. As per tradition, on the morning of the first day of Tet, our whole family visits my parents' side first. My parents' house isn't far from ours. It only takes about 15 minutes by motorbike, but since we have a small child, I drove the car for convenience. Lan sat in the back seat, holding our son in her arms. She didn't say a word the whole way, just leaned down to adjust the baby's blanket. I glanced at the rearview mirror a few times, feeling a bit of frustration that was hard to name. My parents' house was full that day. My father wore a brown sweater, sitting at the table drinking tea and receiving guests. My mother was visibly excited, wearing a deep red dye, her hair neatly styled, and wearing the gold bracelets she often bragged about as her savings. As soon as she saw me carrying our son inside, she beamed with joy. Oh, my eldest grandson is finally here. Come here, let grandma hold you. Lan bowed her head to greet her parents-in-law and handed the baby to her. My mother took the baby but still cast a quick glance at the gift basket in Lan's hand. I had bought that basket the previous afternoon. It contained a box of cookies, some tea, and a bottle of good cooking oil. Not exactly meager, but certainly not luxurious. My mother was pleased that I had listened to her, but she deliberately spoke up in front of the aunts and uncles sitting nearby. Fuck and his wife are better at budgeting this year. For Ted, what matters is the sentiment, not just throwing money around for everyone else to see. An aunt heard this and immediately chuckled. Yeah, raising a child is expensive nowadays, and since the daughter-in-law stays home to care for the baby, the husband must know how to save money. My mother immediately followed up, her tone half joking, half serious. That's right, Fuck is the only one working in this house. If he doesn't know how to save, who will do it for him? The in-laws on the other side should be understanding, too. They can't just keep expecting their son-in-law to give them money every year. I heard it, but I didn't react. Lan was standing by the altar, her hands adjusting the fruit tray for my mother. Her back stiffened for a brief second, but then she continued as if she hadn't heard a thing. Seeing that, I thought to myself that her silence meant she understood the situation. My mother's words were a bit blunt, but they weren't exactly wrong. After lighting the incense, wishing my parents a happy Tet, and giving lucky money to my nieces and nephews, I sat down for some tea. My mother seized the chance to pull me toward the kitchen, lowering her voice. Remember what I said when we go over there later, don't give them any extra money. A basket of cakes is enough. You have to let them know you're not easily taken advantage of. I frowned. Mom, you shouldn't say that. They are my parents-in-law after all. My mother glared at me immediately. So what if they're your parents-in-law? Did they ever raise you for a single day? Their daughter quit her job to stay home, and you're the one breaking your back to support her. And now you still have to bring them money like you owe them something? I stayed silent. My silence then wasn't because I opposed my mother, but because I was already leaning toward her side. Seeing me stay quiet, Mom softened her tone. I'm not telling you to be unfilial. I just want you to maintain your position as a man. A man who is too soft will eventually be walked all over by his wife and her family. Her words kept stuck in my head. Near noon, Lan carried our child to the car. Before leaving, she took a small red envelope from her pocket and placed it in the gift basket. Seeing that, I frowned and asked, where did that money come from? Lan turned, her voice still very soft. It's money I saved up myself. It's just for my parents, lucky money for the new year. I felt annoyed. I already said this year we're only giving gifts of food. She looked at me for a moment, her expression so calm that it made me feel uneasy. This is my own contribution. It's not much, don't you worry. Hearing that, I felt even more uncomfortable inside. My wife stays home and doesn't work, yet she still has her own money. I didn't ask further, but a suspicion, small as a thorn, began to prick my mind. Where did she save that money from? Has she been hiding it from me all this time, or did her parents give it to her? At that moment, I didn't think in a positive direction at all. I only thought my wife was quietly keeping a portion for herself. The car left my parents' house, driving down the village road strewn with dry leaves and peach branches set up on porches. People were out visiting for Tet more than usual. Some wore new clothes, carrying gift bags, laughing and talking excitedly. Yet, inside my car, it was silent. Lan sat in the back, one arm holding our child, the other hand clutching a red envelope in her coat pocket. The boy slept soundly, occasionally pouting his lips as if dreaming of something very happy. I wanted to say something, but then stopped myself. In my head, my mother's words still echoed. Don't let your in-laws lead you by the nose. I told myself that once we arrived, I would just greet them normally, put down the gift basket, give a symbolic red envelope, and leave. If Lan's parents were sad, they should also understand their son-in-law's situation. Lan suddenly spoke up. Fuck. I looked in the mirror. What? She asked very softly. If my parents ask anything later, just say that we have many expenses this year, and don't mention your mother. I was slightly taken aback. That statement should have made me see that she knows how to save face for my family. But at that moment, I thought she was just afraid her parents would lose face, so she acted preemptively. I replied curtly, how am I supposed to say that? Lan didn't say anything more. She turned her face to look out the window. The first day of Tet sunlight spread over the lush, peaceful vegetable fields behind the village. I looked at that scene, yet my heart remained heavy with petty calculations. In just a few minutes, the car would turn into the gate of my in-laws' house. I still thought I was about to see the familiar courtyard and a few flower beds on the porch. My in-laws would be waiting for their grandchild with gentle smiles like every other year. I still thought the simple gift basket on the passenger seat would be what allowed me to maintain the upper hand as a calculating man. But I was wrong. As the car slowly turned into the alley of Lan's house, I saw from afar that many motorbikes were parked packed tightly in front of the gate. Shadows of people moving back and forth, laughter, calls to line up, and the clatter of cardboard boxes echoed all the way out to the street. I frowned and slowed down. Is there a memorial service or something going on at your place today? Lan didn't answer right away. She just held our child a little tighter, her gaze fixed intently on her family's yard. In that very moment, an indescribable sense of unease welled up within me. And as the car rolled through the familiar wooden gate, the scene before me left me frozen in my tracks. I slammed on the brakes almost by reflex, and the car jerked to a stop in the middle of the yard. The tires crunched against the still damp packed earth, creating a harsh, dry sound. Before me was not the quiet yard with a few pots of yellow chrysanthemums like every other year, nor the sight of my in-laws sitting on the porch waiting for their children and grandchildren to arrive for Tet. The entire yard was packed with people, bustling and vibrant, no different from a small year-end market. On the left side of the yard, 3 small trucks were parked one behind the other. The tailgates were wide open, revealing interiors stacked high with square cardboard boxes, carefully labeled. Each box bore the bold lettering, Mock Lan, household goods, handcrafted Tet items. I stared at the words, my mind going blank for a few seconds. Mock Lan, the name sounded strangely familiar, but before I could figure out why, a chorus of voices called out in front of me. Move those boxes of candied fruit to the truck over there. Be careful not to dent the corners. Ms. Mui, our group has finished another 20 sets of fabric bags. Who is holding the delivery slip for the Eureka Garden Agency? These phrases rang out continuously, sharp, urgent, nothing like the usual scene of people gathering for Tet. A group of neighborhood women, some in old coats, others with scarves wrapped around their heads, were lining up by a large wooden table in the middle of the yard, each holding a red envelope, their faces beaming as if they had received something precious. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Mui, stood behind the table holding a thick ledger, handing out envelopes with a gentle smile. Here's yours, Ms. Tam, for 26 days of boxing work in the 12th month, and this is your extra Tet bonus, at least enough to buy the kids some new clothes. The woman receiving the envelope bowed in thanks, her eyes red-rimmed. Without you and Lan, I wouldn't know how to make ends meet this Tet. I sat frozen behind the steering wheel. My father-in-law, Mr. Tin, was no longer wearing his usual simple brown clothes. That day, he wore a crisp white shirt, pen in hand, signing delivery slips. Before him lay a stack of invoices, order books, and delivery notes, all neatly clipped. He didn't speak much, but every movement was confident and familiar, like someone who had been doing this for a long time, not just today. Lan sat in the back, silent. My son stirred in his mother's arms. He babbled a few times. I turned to look at her. Lan's gaze was neither panicked nor surprised. She just bent down to adjust our son's wool hat and said softly, "Park the car closer to the side, don't block the trucks." That sentence brought me back to reality. I clumsily steered the car to the edge of the yard. As I opened the door and stepped out, the scent of fresh wood, clean fabric, and cardboard filled my nose. These scents blended with the aroma of Tet incense. It created a strange sensation, both cozy and busy, making me feel like a visitor lost in an entirely unfamiliar place. I looked around under the eaves. Shelves were neatly stacked with wooden jam trays, fabric-wrapped Tet gift boxes, small embroidered bags, decorative lamps, and baskets woven from thin bamboo strips. Everything was clean, refined, and clearly labeled. This wasn't some hobby, nor was it the trivial nonsense I had dismissed when I saw Lan ordering ribbons and boxes. What stunned me most was the sign hanging in the middle of the yard, a wooden board with dark engraved letters, topped with a small peach blossom branch. Those words struck me hard. Thank you to Ms. Hong Lan, founder of Mock Lan Home Goods. I read the words over and over, my heart pounding so hard my chest ached. Founder, Hong Lan, my wife, the woman I had spent months thinking only knew how to stay home, hold a baby, spend my money, and make a few crafts to keep herself busy. A middle-aged woman in the crowd saw Lan and exclaimed, "Lan, you're back, dear." She ran over, grabbed my wife's hand, her voice filled with unconcealable joy. Thank goodness. I was about to call the packaging team to ask where the new label samples are. If you hadn't returned, we would have been a mess. Lan smiled very gently. I left them in the blue bag on the second shelf, ma'am. I'll go in and check the final orders for everyone in a moment. Another person carrying a child of about 5 walked over, smiling as she spoke. Thanks to you, the whole neighborhood is getting a Tet bonus this year. Lan, dear, unlike previous years, when we women had no vegetable season work, sitting idle and struggling to make ends meet, I stood nearby, hearing every word, my ears burning hot. People spoke about my wife with gratitude and respect. Yet I, her husband, was the only one who knew nothing. At that moment, a young man in a black jacket holding a stack of papers ran in from the gate. As soon as he saw Lan, he immediately bowed. "Ms. Lan, the agency just called to confirm an additional 800 tray sets for after Tet. They asked if we could finish in time so they can transfer the deposit right away." 800 sets. Those two words felt like a bell ringing straight inside my head. I looked at Lan, expecting her to look confused or at least ask for clarification, but she only thought for a few seconds before speaking clearly, telling them to transfer 30% first. "After the full moon of the first lunar month, we'll deliver the first batch. Make sure to specify light-colored wood samples, dark red binding strings, and don't use the overly glossy type." The young man nodded, scribbled in his notebook, and ran off. I watched him go, my throat tightening. My wife isn't just making a few crafts for fun, she's running an actual business. There are orders, workers, plans, customers, and wages for the entire neighborhood. My mother-in-law only just noticed me. She stepped closer, keeping the same gentle smile as always. "Fuck, you're back? Are you tired from the trip? Come inside and have some water first. The yard is a bit messy, haven't had time to clear the last year-end orders." I opened my mouth but couldn't utter a single word. "Messy, you say?" The yard she called messy, in my eyes at that moment, was nothing more than a slap in the face to my own foolish arrogance. I was just about to bow in greeting when my eyes suddenly caught a figure hiding by the porch, behind some cardboard boxes. I froze. The person wore a deep crimson dye, the familiar gold bracelet still on her wrist, her face deathly pale, her eyes darting around like someone caught red-handed. "It's my mother, Mrs. Bitch." I stood stunned, a cold chill running down my spine. My mother had arrived at my in-laws before my wife and me. The same person who just told me not to give my in-laws another penny. The same person who said my in-laws should know their place because their daughter was sponging off me. Now, she was standing in their courtyard with a look of pathetic panic. I looked at my mother, then at Lan. Lan had seen her too, but she didn't seem surprised. She just held our child closer to her chest, her gaze darkening. In that moment, I realized something truly terrifying. Something had happened before I arrived. And that something was certainly not just a simple pre-Tet visit between in-laws. I stood rooted to the spot in the yard, feeling as if all the surrounding chatter and laughter had suddenly been pushed far away. Seeing my gaze, my mother quickly turned away, her hand clutching the edge of her dye. That awkwardness was nothing like the mother who, just this morning, lectured me on asserting my dominance as a man and keeping my in-laws in line. Before me now was a panicked woman, avoiding eye contact as if she feared something being brought to light. I stepped closer, my voice rasping, "Mom, why are you here?" My mother jumped, quickly forcing a distorted smile. Mom just stopped by to wish your in-laws a happy early Tet. We're family, after all. What's strange about me coming over early?" If it were any other time, I would have believed her immediately, but at that moment, my father-in-law's expression, Lan's silence, and my mother's deathly pale face made me realize things were not simple. My father-in-law, Mr. Tin, set his pen down on the table. He was naturally a gentle man, soft-spoken, who had never raised his voice at anyone. But then his voice dropped significantly. "Mrs. Bitch, if it were just Tet greetings, that would be fine, but since this matter has come up, I think we should clear it up once and for all with fuck here." My mother immediately changed her expression. She hissed, "Mr. Tin, what are you trying to pull during Tet? If there's something to discuss, let's wait until after the holiday. Don't make the kids uncomfortable." I turned to my father-in-law, then back to my mother. "What is this all about?" My mother glared at me. "Be quiet. This has nothing to do with you." That statement left me even more stunned. How could something happening between my mother and my in-laws on the first day of Tet possibly not involve me? Only then did Lan walk over, holding our child. She didn't raise her voice, but every word she spoke was crystal clear. "It involves you, mother, because you borrowed that money to pay off Kwan's debts, yet you told fuck that my parents were freeloaders." I felt as if someone had struck me hard in the chest. My ears were ringing. I looked at Lan, stammering. "What did you say? What debt does Kwan have? Who did mother borrow money from?" My mother snapped at me immediately. "Shut up. Don't you dare slander me in front of my son." But as soon as she finished speaking, my father-in-law quietly opened a drawer and took out a folded paper inside a plastic sleeve. He didn't throw it or wave it around. He simply placed it neatly on the table in front of me. Fuck, see for yourself. I walked over, my hands trembling as I picked up the paper. It clearly stated the date, the amount of 180 million Vietnamese dongs, and the recipient as Nguyen T. Bich. The stated purpose was to borrow funds to cover goods debt for her son, Din Quan. It promised repayment in installments after Tet. Below were my mother's signature and a bright red fingerprint. I looked at that familiar handwriting, and my throat tightened. Din Quan is my younger brother. He has never been stable, starting jobs only to quit after a few days. Recently, he said he was importing some household goods to sell for Tet. I thought it was just a small business. I never knew he was in debt to the point where mother had to scramble for nearly 200 million. And I certainly didn't know that the people who saved him from disaster were my in-laws, whose Tet gift money I had cut at my mother's urging. I turned to my mother, my voice trembling. Mom, is this paper real? My mother pressed her lips together, her eyes bloodshot, but she still tried to make excuses. I just borrowed it temporarily. What's the big deal? Your in-laws are well off, so helping us out is only right. Should I have let strangers seize your brother's debt? Lan looked at my mother, her voice remaining calm. If you only borrowed it, I wouldn't have anything to say. But after taking the money, you told fuck that my parents were looking for Ted gifts and that I was just a dependent. Don't you think that's excessive? My mother snapped at Lan, her gaze as sharp as a knife. You're a daughter-in-law. How dare you expose your mother-in-law in the middle of the yard? I borrowed from your parents. What does that have to do with you? Or are you trying to take this opportunity to climb over your husband's family? Lan held her child closer, her lips pressed together. I saw her shoulders tremble slightly, but she didn't back down. She spoke very softly, yet it was painfully sharp. I don't want to climb over anyone. I just want you to stop stepping on my parents after they saved our family. That sentence made me hang my head low. I wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. All the pride of a man in me was stripped away at that moment. I remembered the simple fruit basket in the car, Lan's small envelope, and Mom's warnings not to let my in-laws take advantage of us. Everything suddenly became humiliating. Just then, there was the sound of a motorcycle braking hard at the gate. Din Quan ran in, his face pale and his jacket disheveled. Seeing me, he froze, then looked at Mom and the paper in my hand. He realized everything had been exposed. Brother, Quan called to me, his voice choked, and I looked at him. What is the meaning of this? Are you really in debt? Quan bowed his head, his hands twisted tightly, then suddenly knelt down in the middle of the yard. Brother, I'm sorry. I was greedy to import cheap goods, thinking I'd make a profit for Tet, but the goods were defective and customers returned everything. Quote, the supplier pressured me for payment and threatened to bring people to the house. Mom didn't dare tell you, so she borrowed money from Lan's family. I stood frozen in my tracks. Quan turned to my parents-in-law, bowed his head low, and said, I apologize to you both. I know I was wrong. If it weren't for Lan showing me how to extend the debt, and both of you helping with the money, my family would be ruined this Tet. My mother lunged forward and slapped Quan very hard. The sound of the slap rang out sharply across the yard. Do you want this whole family to be humiliated and disgraced? Who told you to speak? Quan covered his face, tears welling up, but he didn't argue back. My father-in-law stepped forward to stand in front of Quan. He looked at my mother, his voice quiet but heavy. Mrs. Bitch, the boy knows he was wrong and is brave enough to admit it. If adults like us are wrong and keep blaming others, how can we have the face to teach our children? My mother was struck speechless. The whole yard went silent. The workers also stopped, no one daring to say a word. Lan held our child and turned away. I saw her eyes turn red, but she didn't cry. As for me, for the first time in my life, standing between my mother, my wife, and my in-laws, I didn't know who to defend, nor where to begin apologizing. My father-in-law added slowly, money debts can be repaid, but debts of kindness without a sense of shame are very hard to pay back, my son. That sentence felt like a dull knife cutting into my heart. I looked at my mother, then at my younger brother, and finally at Lan. The woman I once thought was a burden. It turns out she had been silently supporting my whole family while I was too busy listening to bitter words and looking down on her. And at that moment, I understood that this Tet would no longer be a normal Tet. A door to the truth had opened, bringing with it things I had never had the courage to face. After my father-in-law's words, the whole yard of my in-laws' house sank into a heavy silence. The sound of cardboard boxes hitting each other, the voices of people calling for deliveries, the children's laughter from before, all seemed to be stifled halfway. I stood there, still clutching the debt acknowledgement, feeling as if every word on the paper was heating up, burning in my palm. I turned to my mother, my throat tight and choked. Mom, is this true? My mother looked at me, her eyes bloodshot but still trying to maintain a tough facade. She snatched the paper from my hand, crumpled a corner, and gritted her teeth. So what if it's true? I borrowed it, I didn't steal it. The in-laws have money. What's wrong with helping each other out in times of trouble? I looked at her, and for the first time, I couldn't find a single reason to defend my mother. If it had just been borrowing money, I might have been able to understand. But what hurt me was that after borrowing money from my wife's parents, Mom still came back and told me they were expecting Tet gifts, that Lan was a freeloader, and that I needed to cut off her money to maintain my status as a man. It turns out the status I thought I was maintaining was just a shadow built on my own mother's duplicity. Lan stood there, holding our child in her arms. The boy seemed to sense the tense atmosphere and buried his face in her shoulder. His mouth was puckered as if about to cry. Lan patted his back, her voice steady, but I could hear exhaustion that had been suppressed for too long. Mom, you borrowed money. I don't blame you. If Uncle Quan was in trouble, I would help if I could, but you shouldn't have come back and made up stories to make fuck look down on my parents. My mother let out a laugh, sharp and bitter. Making up stories, you say? You think you're so smart, don't you? Just because you have a small workshop with a few neighbors working for you, you think you're some big boss? Do you think this gives you the right to act superior to your husband's family? Lan looked straight at my mother. This was the first time I saw my wife's eyes not looking away. She didn't shout, she didn't tremble, but every word felt like it was being hammered into the brick floor. I don't need to act superior to anyone. I just need you not to use my parents' kindness as a way to humiliate me. Din Quan was still kneeling in the yard. One side of his cheek was red from my mother's slap. He bowed his head low, his voice thick and hoarse. Mom, please don't talk to Lan like that anymore. If it weren't for her, people would have come to the house for me already. She didn't just give me money to spend. She made me sit down, list every single debt, and call every supplier to ask to pay them back slowly. She also told me that if I did something wrong, I should own up to it, and not let our aging mother bear the burden. I stood frozen. I had never known any of this. While I was at home acting like the pillar of the family, giving myself the right to judge my wife, Lan was quietly helping my brother escape the mess he had created himself. She never claimed credit, never sent messages blaming me, and never brought it up to demand my gratitude. She just remained silent, as she had been for all these past months. My mother snapped toward Quan, hissing, "Shut up. Is the shame not enough for you? Do you want the whole family to know we had to borrow from your brothers-in-laws?" Quan looked up, tears rolling down his cheeks. He said softly but clearly, "I am ashamed because I was wrong, not because someone helped me. Mom, the person losing face isn't Lan. It's me, it's you, and it's the way we accept favors only to turn around and badmouth them." That statement left my mother stunned for a few seconds. I was stunned as well. In my eyes, Din Quan had always been an impulsive brother, greedy for quick wealth, always letting mother cover for him. Yet, at that very moment, he was the one who dared to say what I lacked the courage to speak. My father-in-law stepped forward to help Quan up. He didn't gloat, nor did he scold. He just brushed the dust off Quan's knees and said, "Stand up, son. A man may fall, but do not kneel forever before your mistakes. If you know you're wrong, fix it. If you let others pay your debts for a lifetime, you will owe more than just money later." Quan burst into tears. He bowed his head before my parents-in-law. Quote, "I apologize to you both. I apologize to Lan. I will pay it back. I'll do anything, as long as I can repay that debt." My mother-in-law, Mrs. Mui, sighed. She looked at Quan with eyes both stern and compassionate. Quote, "I don't need big promises from you. After Tet, just start over honestly. It's okay if the money comes slowly, just don't live a life of secrecy anymore." Hearing those words, I felt so ashamed I dared not lift my head. The people I once thought were unsophisticated and in need of my Tet money behaved more honorably than I ever imagined. They did not use the debt to humiliate my family. They only wanted the truth to be respected. Seeing that no one stood on her side, my mother was shaking with rage. She pointed her finger at Lan. Quote, "You're quite clever. You set up this whole yard, this whole sign, just waiting for us to arrive so you could humiliate us, right? I knew it. A woman as quiet as you is the most terrifying kind." Lan pursed her lips, but before she could speak, I stepped forward. I don't know where the strength came from, but I stood between my mother and my wife. My voice trembled, but this time I didn't back down. "Mom, that's enough." My mother stared at me, stunned. "What did you say?" I swallowed hard and said, "I said that's enough. You borrowed money from my in-laws, hid it from me, then goaded me into cutting off their Tet gifts. You made me misunderstand my wife and her parents. On this, you are wrong. The whole yard went completely silent. My mother looked at me as if she couldn't believe it. Perhaps in her entire life, she never imagined I would one day stand before others and tell her she was wrong. As for me, once I said those words, my chest ached as if being squeezed tight. But strangely, within that pain, there was a sense of relief. Relieved because, for the first time, I didn't stay silent. Lan turned to look at me. Her gaze didn't soften immediately, nor did she seem moved. It was just deep and still, as if observing whether this change was real or just a moment of impulse. I understood. I had no right to demand she believe me after just one sentence. My father-in-law slowly folded the debt note and placed it back where it was. He looked at me, his voice dropping. Fuck, you know the truth now. I don't need you to take the side of your in-laws. I only hope you can distinguish between true family love and wrongs hidden behind the name of family. I lowered my head, my eyes stinging. Just then, the sound of motorcycles screeching and a strange man shouting rang out from the gate. My mother's face turned pale upon hearing the noise, while Lan immediately hugged our child and took a step back. I spun toward the gate, a cold chill running through me. It's the first day of Tet in my in-laws' yard. A truth had just come to light, but I felt the real storm hadn't even begun yet. 3 motorcycles screeched to a halt at the gate, kicking up a thin cloud of dust into the yard. Before I could process what was happening, 3 men stepped off. The leader was short but broad-shouldered, wearing a thick silver chain, a scar on his left cheek reaching toward his chin. The 2 behind him were younger, wearing black jackets, their eyes scanning the yard as if inspecting every crate and product shelf. The moment my mother saw them, her expression changed completely. She stepped forward quickly, her voice low but urgent. Why are you here? I already told you I would handle it myself. The man with the scar gave a faint, raspy laugh that was very unpleasant. Mrs. Bitch called us, so we came. Why ask why we're here now? I turned sharply toward my mother. Did you call them here? My mother avoided my gaze, her mouth still set stubbornly. I just asked some acquaintances to come and clear things up. The in-laws keep threatening me with debt papers. I need someone to witness things. The man walked straight into the yard like he owned the place, looked around, and stopped at a stack of cardboard boxes labeled, Mock Land. Quote, business is booming, huh? Yet you can't even be reasonable about a simple loan document. He pulled up a chair to the wooden table and tapped his fingers on the surface. Where's the debt paper? Bring it out so we can talk. My father-in-law remained calm, but I saw his hand gripping his pen tightly. He asked, who are you to come into my house and demand to see documents? The other man smirked. The name's Lamb. People usually call me Scar-Faced Lamb. I don't like to waste time. Mrs. Bitch says your family forced her to sign that debt note. It's almost Tet. I suggest you tear up the paper to keep things peaceful. The atmosphere in the yard instantly grew as tense as a wire. The women in the workshop who were lining up for their wages quickly stepped back. A few people hugged their crates and huddled against the eaves. I heard my heart pounding in my chest. Even though I didn't know the exact relationship between my mother and these people, I knew these weren't the kind of acquaintances who came for a friendly chat. Lan handed our child quickly to my mother-in-law and stepped forward. Her voice was still calm, but it was no longer soft. Quote, Mr. Lamb, this is my parents' house. If you're here to wish us a happy Tet, you're welcome to a drink. But if you're here to apply pressure, please get out of the yard. Scar-Faced Lamb laughed and looked Lan up and down. Ah, you must be Hong Lan, right? The founder, or whatever it says on that sign. Let me be honest, women with a little money tend to think they're something, but don't meddle in adult lending matters. Lan didn't back down. That money concerned my family, the papers were kept by my parents, and the borrower was my mother-in-law. If I don't get involved, then who will? My mother immediately shouted, you still dare to speak? It's because of you that I had to call these people here. Do you think a few crates of goods can intimidate me? I felt a chill run down my spine as my mother spoke. Just a few minutes ago, she was still telling her to stop by for Tet. Now, in front of strangers, she no longer hid her intent to force my in-laws to stay silent. I stepped forward and pulled my mother's arm. Mom, please go home. We will talk about this later. She shoved my hand away, her eyes blazing. Move aside. Today I must reclaim my honor. I cannot let your in-laws walk all over our family. Lamb Scar saw this and stood up, walked over to the stack of crates, and nudged one with his foot. Quote, honor should be maintained. If people don't want to pay, then let it go. Why hold on to papers and ruin relationships? With that, he suddenly kicked a crate of trays hard onto the yard. The lid popped open, and small wooden trays rolled across the ground. The loud crash hit everyone straight in the heart. The women in the workshop cried out. An older woman hurried to pick them up, her trembling hands dusting off the dirt from each tray. "Oh my God, that's for delivery this afternoon. What are you men doing?" Lamb Scar glared at her. "Old woman, move aside. This is none of your business." Hearing that, she stood up straight, her voice still trembling but firm. "How can it not be my business? This is my work sanding them, and my daughter's work tying the strings. My whole family is counting on this money for Tet. Who gave you the right to destroy it?" That statement seemed to give everyone in the yard more courage. A few other women also stepped forward and bent down to help pick up the goods. They didn't raise their voices, but the way they stood right beside Lan said it all. I looked at the scene, and a lump formed in my throat. It turns out Lan isn't just doing a job for herself. She is protecting the livelihood of many others. Din Quan stepped in front of Lamb Scar, his voice hoarse. "Lamb, the debt is mine. If you want to collect, collect from me. Don't touch my sister-in-law, and don't destroy their goods." Lamb Co squinted. "Can you even pay it, or are you just talking big?" Quan hung his head. "I can't pay it all right now, but I will pay it back. I'll take any job, labor or otherwise, but if you trash this place, you're wrong." Lamb Co sneered, raising his hand to shove Quan aside. I don't know where I found the courage, but at that moment, I stepped in front of my brother. Quote, "Enough. As his brother, I will handle Quan's debt with him. But this is my wife's home. You have no right to come in here and wreck it." Lan turned to look at me, her eyes wavering for a second before returning to a calm expression. I understood. One act of standing up wasn't enough for her to trust me, but I couldn't back down this time. My mother looked at me, her voice trembling with anger. Quote, "Are you turning your back on your own mother for your wife?" I looked at her, my heart aching like it was being cut with a knife, but I spoke every word clearly. "I'm not turning my back on you, Mom. I just can't let you keep making mistakes." Lamb Co snorted coldly and moved a step forward again when my father-in-law suddenly spoke up. "If you want to discuss paperwork, go to the village, but if you want to trash this place, I'll call the local police immediately." He laughed. "Are you threatening me?" My father-in-law slowly pointed up at the corner of the eaves. "Not a threat. My home security camera has recorded everything since you entered the gate. Even what you said when you called them here is all on tape." Everyone froze. My mother turned pale. Lamb Co looked up, saw the small camera mounted under the eaves, and his expression instantly changed. I stood in the middle of the yard, cold sweat breaking out on my back. It turned out this storm had been recorded bit by bit. It couldn't be denied or covered up. And in that very moment, I understood that my mother had pushed things much further than just a debt. When my father-in-law pointed to the camera under the eaves, Lamb Co's face changed at once. His aggressive demeanor from moments ago seemed to collapse halfway. He stared up at the small black lens, then back at the pile of trays knocked over on the ground. The two men with him also began to look at each other, no longer acting as fierce as when they first walked in. My father-in-law said nothing more. He simply pulled out his phone, opened the camera footage, and set it on the table. The recent events were crystal clear on the screen, from the moment the three men entered the yard and my mother stood by the porch, to Lamb Scar kicking the crate and threatening to tear up the debt papers. Everything was so evident that no one could possibly deny it. Lamb Scar cleared his throat, trying to save face. Quote, "It's Tet, I only came to talk, don't overreact." Lan looked at him, her voice calm. "If you only came to talk, we would have offered you tea, but you kicked over our goods and threatened to destroy debt documents. That is no longer just talking." I stood right next to Lan, feeling both protective and full of admiration as I listened. She didn't tremble, didn't cry, and didn't use the crowd as an excuse to make a scene. She simply spoke the truth, each word clear enough to leave the wrongdoer with no room to hide. I suddenly felt ashamed that for so long, this woman had been much stronger than me. Lamb Scar looked over at my mother as if wanting her to speak up and save him, but by now, my mother had turned pale. She wouldn't look at anyone, only muttering, "I didn't tell you to destroy the goods. I only asked you to come and say a few words." That statement sent a chill down my spine. Even now, she still wanted to wash her hands of it, still wanting to push the blame onto others. I turned to her and said quietly but firmly, "Mom, if you keep lying, I won't know how to face you anymore." My mother froze, her eyes turning red with a mix of anger and hurt. Are you talking to your mother like that just because of your wife? I looked at her for a long time. For the first time in my life, I felt that question no longer made me soften as it once did. I slowly replied, I'm on the side of right. If our house had our goods destroyed today, would you accept it if they said it was just a misunderstanding? She went deathly silent. Seeing the situation spiraling, Lamb Scar lowered his voice. All right, fine, I'll pay for whatever damage this crate caused. As for Kwan's debts, you all can settle that yourselves. Saying that, he brushed off his hands and turned toward the gate, but my father-in-law spoke up. You can go, but before you leave, you must apologize to the people who made these goods. He froze, his face darkening. One of the guys with him tried to protest, but seeing the camera still recording on the phone, he had to pull Lamb Scar away. After a few seconds of silence, Lamb Scar turned back and said bluntly, Sorry, happy now? Lan accepted immediately. She bent down to pick up a candy tray with a chipped corner and held it in front of him. Quote, Don't apologize to me, apologize to Ms. Tam, the person who sat and sanded every single one of these trays for 3 nights straight to meet the Tet deadline. Ms. Tam stood nearby, her hands still covered in wood dust. She looked at Lamb Scar with red-rimmed eyes. He gritted his teeth, but eventually turned to her. I'm sorry. The apology wasn't sincere, everyone could hear that, but at least on that first day of Tet, he had to bow his head before the workers he had just looked down on. The 3 men left the yard in a heavy silence. Once the sound of their motorbikes faded away, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. The women in the workshop bent down to pick up the goods, sorting out what was still usable and what was damaged. Din Kwan also immediately rolled up his sleeves to help everyone. He picked up each tray, wiped off every speck of dirt, his head bowed in shame. I stepped over to help him. Kwan looked at me, his voice hoarse. Please don't scold Mom in front of everyone anymore, but don't let her keep doing wrong either. I don't want Lan to suffer any more because of me. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see him as just a troublesome kid who only knew how to cause trouble. Before me was a young man who was beginning to understand the price of his mistakes. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Quote, From now on, we'll handle your debts together, but you have to stand on your own 2 feet, no more hiding behind Mom. Kwan nodded, his eyes red. I understand. Lan stood not far away, checking the damaged goods. I walked up to her and said in a low voice, Lan, I'm sorry, if I had reacted slower earlier. She interrupted me, her voice not cold, but distant. Quote, You don't need to apologize for what just happened. I appreciate that you stood up for us. I was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when she continued, but fuck, one moment of standing up for her doesn't erase all the times you stayed silent. Her words were like a thin blade cutting through my heart. Not violently painful, but deep. I looked at her, unable to refute it because she was right. I had stayed silent when my mother called her lazy, silent when she mocked her for being a dependent, and silent when I used that very silence to fuel my own disregard for my wife. Inside the house, my son suddenly began to wail. Lan immediately turned to go inside and pick him up. The boy pressed his face against his mother's chest, sobbing as if he had just been through a terrifying ordeal. Lan comforted him, not looking at me anymore. That image left a lump in my throat. I wanted to step forward and embrace them both, but I realized I didn't have the right to ask for that. My mother was still standing on the porch, her face dark and stern. She didn't apologize, nor did she say anything more. When I looked over, she simply turned her face away coldly. I understood that her anger had not yet subsided. Perhaps in my mother's mind, the one at fault was still Lan, the in-laws, everyone except herself. My father-in-law walked up to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. He didn't blame me, but what he said stayed with me forever. Fuck, being a man isn't about how much money you can earn. The hardest part is knowing how to bow your head when you're wrong and stand tall when the one you love is being mistreated. I bowed my head, my eyes stinging. The yard at my in-laws gradually returned to its work rhythm, but my heart could no longer be at peace. I knew from that moment on, if I wanted to keep Lan, I couldn't just say, I'm sorry. I had to relearn how to be a husband, starting with one thing: stop taking my wife's patience for granted. After the group left, my in-laws' yard remained in complete disarray. The jam trays that had fallen to the ground were gathered in a corner. Some were chipped, others just dusty and could be wiped clean. None of the women in the workshop complained. They just quietly sorted through them and kept working. The way they bent down to pick up each item made my heart feel heavy. That was not just merchandise, it was hard work, daily meals, medicine, and tuition for many families in the neighborhood. Quan stayed behind to help everyone. He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and carried each crate into the porch. His face still showed a red mark from the earlier slap, but he didn't utter a single complaint. At one point, a woman in the workshop said, "Just go inside and have some water, we're used to this work." Quan shook his head. "Please let me do it. I caused this mess, so I have to clean it up. At least I should do something to feel less ashamed." Quote, hearing that, I choked up. My younger brother, who used to only care about get-rich-quick schemes and always thought he was smarter than everyone, was now bowing his head to learn how to make amends through the smallest tasks. He pulled me into a corner of the yard and lowered his voice. "Fuck, don't end up like me. I lost face because I owed money, but you're about to lose your wife because you owe her kindness." I was stunned into silence. A single sentence from the brother who had once turned our whole family upside down left me unable to argue back. Quan wasn't lecturing me, nor was he trying to act superior. He was speaking from the very shame he had just endured. I looked at him, seeing for the first time in his eyes the clarity of someone who has finally learned to fear the consequences. My parents-in-law still did not send my mother away. Even though Mom had just brought people over to cause a scene, Mrs. Mui still brewed a pot of hot tea, placed it on the table, and spoke very softly. She told her to have a cup of tea to warm up. "It's Tet, so whatever needs to be said should be, but let's not scare the elderly and the children in the house any further." Hearing that, I felt both grateful and ashamed. If it were my mother, would she have been able to offer someone such a dignified way out? My mother didn't drink the tea. She sat on the edge of the porch with a face as cold as stone. Her gaze occasionally flickered toward Lan. It was no longer the confusion from earlier, but a smoldering resentment. I knew my mother didn't concede. She didn't think she was wrong. She only thought she had lost. And for those who treat pride as their reason for being, losing in front of in-laws is more unbearable than losing money. When it was just the two of us left on the porch, my mother grabbed my arm, her voice low but sharp. "Look at this, your wife is no simple woman. She set up this whole workshop, gathered all these people, just to make me lose face. If you stay this blind, the day will come when her family walks all over us." I looked at my mother with exhaustion. "Mom, the one who lost face wasn't Lan. It was you, by your own doing." She froze. That statement likely hurt more than any reproach, but I couldn't swallow it anymore. If you hadn't borrowed money and then badmouthed her family, if you hadn't brought people here to cause trouble, who could have made you lose face today? My mother stared at me, her lips trembling. For a brief moment, I thought she would cry, but then she turned away with a sneer. "Brilliant, now you're talking just like her family." Having said that, she got up and went inside, not looking at me again. That evening, my father-in-law told everyone to stop working early. That was enough for the holidays. "Deliver what's ready, and we'll take the loss on the rest. People are more important than goods." That simple statement made the women in the yard go quiet. Some smiled, while others teared up. Lan stood beside her mother, recording the damaged items, her expression calm, but I knew she was unsettled inside. We were just about to sit down for our first meal of the new year when Lan's phone rang. She looked at the screen, frowned slightly, and answered. I couldn't hear what the other side said, but I watched her complexion sink. A moment later, Lan replied, "Yes, I understand. If you need to pause the order, I respect that, but I hope you give me time to verify this, as the information is not true." Quote. After hanging up, she stood still for a few seconds. I asked hurriedly, "What happened?" Lan looked at me, her voice low. "One of our distributors just canceled their order. They said there's a post on the local market group accusing Mock Lan of using defective goods and hiring local women without paying them." The whole family went silent. Mrs. Mui put down her chopsticks. My father-in-law knitted his brows. Din Quan immediately stepped forward. "Sister, let me see that post." Lan opened her phone. On the screen was a long post filled with malicious words. "The person is using a strange account with a floral profile picture and a very fake-sounding name. The post includes photos of moldy boxes and broken products, concluding that Lan's workshop scams customers, exploits labor, and profits from the sweat of poor women." I read it and felt my blood boil. The people in the yard just received their wages and stood up to defend Lan, yet online, a few fabricated lines were enough to paint her as a villain. What hurts more is that the timing of the post is too coincidental. Right after my mother passed away and right after Lam Scar was forced to leave. Lan scrolled down to read the comments, where some people, not knowing the truth, were already hurling harsh insults. Someone wrote that seeing the word handcrafted is a dead giveaway for price gouging scams. Another person said we need to boycott these kinds of family workshops. Those words cut like a knife. I turned to look at my mother. She sat in the corner, head bowed, saying nothing, but her hands were gripping the edge of her shawl tightly. Din Quan looked at the post for a moment and said, "This account was just created. The writing style is just like those services that specialize in sabotaging competitors. I've seen this kind of thing before." Quote, I looked at him. "Do you know who could have done this?" Quan hesitated. "There are groups that specialize in dirty seeding. If someone hires them, they will post, comment, and pretend to be victimized customers. But someone must have provided internal information or at least known what our place is doing." Quote, no one said it, but we all understood who had the clearest motive right now. I felt a chill down my spine. Lan didn't cry or panic. She just held her phone, taking screenshots of every comment and saving every link. Then she looked at me and Quan, her voice very calm. "If you two really want to make amends, don't just promise. Do it properly." Quote. I nodded. Quan nodded too. At that moment, I realized the storm wasn't over. It had just shifted from our courtyard to the internet, where a single slanderous remark could destroy the livelihoods of so many. And this time, I wouldn't allow myself to stand on the sidelines anymore. Din Quan leaned close to the phone screen, scrolled through the comments, and furrowed his brow. He no longer looked panicked like when his debts were exposed, but instead showed the composure of someone who has encountered the uglier side of life. He said, "Fuck, this post wasn't written by a normal person. The way the title is phrased, the emotional bait, and the bandwagon comments below, it's like a group hired to take down the reputation of small businesses." Quote. I asked immediately, "Can you trace it?" Quan nodded, though not entirely sure. "I can try. I used to source goods through trade groups and heard about people hiring others to sabotage competitors. They use new accounts, but if they run mass comments, there will always be a trace." Lan put her phone on the table and said calmly, "Just do what you can. Don't act rashly, don't send abusive messages, and don't claim to know anything without proof." I looked at my wife. Amidst the smear campaign against our business, canceled orders, and the neighborhood's confusion, she was strangely calm. It wasn't an indifferent kind of calm, but the composure of someone accustomed to bearing everything on their own. The more I looked at her, the more my heart ached. In our 3 years of marriage, I had never asked how many times she had faced things like this. Quan made a few phone calls, standing in the corner of the yard speaking softly, occasionally frowning and scribbling some names on the back of a delivery slip. About half an hour later, he returned with a tense expression. "I've got a lead. The account that posted the article is linked to a guy named Track. He owns a plastic fruit box workshop in the next commune and has hired people to play dirty against other shops before." When Lan heard that name, the hand holding her pen froze for a second. It was very slight, but I saw it. I asked, "Do you know this person?" She was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "I do. His full name is Vo Min Track. More than half a year ago, he came here to meet me." Ms. Mui set her teacup down, and my father-in-law also turned to look at Lan. She recounted slowly, her voice steady but her gaze colder. "Back when I started getting stable orders, Track came to see me. He said handmade products were too exhausting and that working on such a small scale wouldn't get me anywhere. He wanted to buy the mock Lan home goods brand, take my designs, and switch to mass-producing plastic items." I frowned, then asked, "You didn't sell?" Lan looked at me as if the question didn't need asking. "No, because if I sell, the women in the neighborhood will lose their jobs, and the products won't be handmade anymore. I don't do this just to make money." That statement left me speechless. Once again, I realized I knew far too little about my wife. Lan continued, "When he was rejected, Track laughed in a very unpleasant way. He said, 'What is a stay-at-home mom doing holding onto a brand? Sell it to me, I'll help you make a living.' Quote. I didn't answer. After that, he messaged me many times demanding to buy my customer list, packaging samples, and even asked about my fabric suppliers. I refused them all. Hearing the term, stay-at-home mom, my face flushed with heat. It's one thing for outsiders to look down on Lan like that, but I, her husband, was no different from them. I had seen those spools of ribbon and rolls of fabric in the house and thought she was wasting money on nonsense. It turns out those were the things she used to build her business and provide a livelihood for so many people. Din Quan handed his phone to Lan and said, look at this. On the screen was a screenshot of a message from one of Kwan's acquaintances. That person said someone had paid to post defamatory content about mock Lan home goods this afternoon. The money was transferred through an intermediary account. The hirer's name wasn't clear, but it mentioned track, not enough for a conclusion, but enough to see the direction. I was about to ask more when Kwan's phone rang. He picked up and turned on the speakerphone because the person on the other end was speaking quite loudly. A young man's voice rang out. I'll keep this brief. This afternoon, I overheard a call from Track's side to an older woman. She said he made her lose face. Handle it however you want. Just don't let that workshop have any peace. I don't know if it's your mother, but the voice sounds like the person standing in the yard earlier. The whole porch seemed to freeze. I turned to look at Mother, Mrs. Bitch, who was sitting in the corner with a pale face. She immediately jumped to her feet. He's lying. I don't know any Track. But her voice was shaking too much. Shaking so much that even a child could tell she was terrified. Lan said nothing. She simply took her phone and pulled up the call history on my mother's device. My mother hurriedly snatched her handbag and clutched it to her chest. What do you think you're doing? It's my phone. What right do you have to look at it? Quote, Lan replied very softly. I don't need to look at your phone. I just want you to answer for yourself in front of everyone. Did you call Track? Quote. My mother pursed her lips and averted her eyes. I looked at her, my heart pounding. A part of me still hoped she would say no, hoping this was all just a misunderstanding, hoping she hadn't gone so far as to help an outsider destroy her daughter-in-law's livelihood. But her silence dragged on for too long. I pulled out my phone and called her right in front of everyone. The ringing sound echoed from inside her bag. My phone screen displayed my mother's name. I looked at her, my voice dry and hollow. Mom, give me the phone. I only need to see the most recent call. She clutched her bag and shouted, Are you crazy? You're going to inspect your own mother's phone for the sake of your wife? Quote, I replied, If you didn't do it, just give it to me. If you did, I need to know even more. Quote, she looked at me with eyes full of both anger and fear. Then she dropped a line that sent a chill down my spine. I only wanted to teach her a lesson. A woman who doesn't know how to bow her head needs to be taught fear. No one said a word. The wind outside blew across the boxes, making the binding strings tremble. Lan stood there expressionless, but I saw her fingers clenched so tight they turned white. Din Kwan suddenly burst into tears, his voice cracking. Mom, she just saved me. Why would you want to hurt her? My mother turned away without answering, and I felt as if all the strength had been drained from me. The woman who gave birth to me, whom I always thought did everything for the family, could, out of a moment of spite, join hands with someone trying to ruin my wife's living and that of a dozen neighbors. Lan spoke in a very quiet voice. Fuck. Do you understand now why I didn't dare tell you everything? Because I was afraid you'd ask if it was my idea, or if I was trying to make your mother lose face. Quote, I bowed my head, unable to answer. From my grandmother's yard, the debt note, the kicked-over crate, to the smear post online, everything tightened like a noose around my neck. I have no way back now. I looked at Lan, then at my mother. This time, I knew I couldn't just apologize. I must stop my mother and that guy Track myself before they ruin not just Lan's work, but the little family I was too foolish to cherish. After Lan's words, I didn't dare to look up at her. My whole life, I thought I was a man of reason, someone who could weigh right from wrong. But it turns out, in my own family, I was the most blind of all. I let my mother dictate my thoughts, and let my own ego turn my wife into the villain. While she quietly supported my entire family without asking for any credit, the defamatory post online continued to target Lan. Lan's phone vibrated every few minutes. There were calls from regular customers asking about the situation, and messages from clients pausing their orders. There were also malicious comments from strangers. But amidst all that, Lan sat straight at the wooden table, quietly taking screenshots, recording phone numbers, and saving every piece of evidence. She didn't scream or curse anyone. That composure only made me feel smaller. I said immediately, Lan, we must report this to the police. My mother is wrong, Track is also wrong. We can't let them do whatever they want. I said this while looking toward my mother. Mrs. Bitch sat in the corner of the porch, her face pale then flushed, her lips pressed tight. Perhaps she didn't expect things to spiral out of control so quickly. Lan looked up at me. Her gaze was no longer as icy as before, but there was still no hint of trust. She said slowly, reporting it is easy, fuck. But have you thought about our child? When they grow up, if people tell them their grandmother was taken to the station on the first day of Tet for harming their mother, how do you think they would feel? I choked on my anger. I had only thought about wanting to set things right. As for Lan, the one most affected, she thought of her young child who didn't understand yet, so she still left my mother a way out. It wasn't out of weakness, but because she understood that if a family completely falls apart, the ones who suffer most are sometimes the children. My father-in-law sighed upon hearing that. He said Lan wasn't wrong, but giving people a way out doesn't mean letting them keep making mistakes. Everything must be made clear. There must be recordings, a written statement, and witnesses. If it happens again later, no one can say we were heartless. I nodded. Din Quan stepped forward at that moment. He was still wearing a shirt covered in sawdust, his hands dirty from helping clear the goods. He looked at me and then at Lan. His voice was hoarse. Sister-in-law, this whole thing started because of my debt. If my mother did wrong because of me, let me call her to set things straight. I won't hide anymore. Lan looked at Quan for a moment. Perhaps in her eyes, this brother-in-law who caused so much trouble still had many faults, but at least today he dared to step up. She nodded slightly. Fine, but let's be clear. I don't need anyone to kneel or cry. I just need you all to stop using the name of family to hurt others. Quan bowed his head. I understand. On the afternoon of the first day, the sun had softened. The courtyard after the morning chaos was cleared up, damaged crates were set aside, and the intact ones were moved to the warehouse. My father-in-law told the workers to head home early, but many still lingered. They said they wanted to testify if needed, because they couldn't let Lan be treated unjustly. Hearing those words, I felt both grateful and pained. My wife earned the trust of outsiders through years of kindness, while I lost her trust through my own indifference in our home. Quan called my mother even though she was sitting not far away. He didn't turn on the speakerphone immediately, just saying, "Mom, please come over so we can talk properly. Don't make things any worse." My mother gave him a cold glare. Are you siding with them too? Quan swallowed hard. No, I'm siding with what's right. You taught me since I was little that if you do wrong, you must admit it. Now I'm asking you to do what you once taught me. That sentence made my mother freeze. She turned away, but eventually stood up and walked to the table. I knew she didn't come because she had a change of heart. She came because she was cornered and couldn't leave. Even so, it was still the first step. Lan poured a cup of hot tea herself and placed it in front of my mother. That action left me speechless. If it were me, after all the insults, schemes, and stabs in the back, I probably wouldn't be calm enough to offer someone who hurt me a drink. But Lan still did it. She set the cup down, her voice calm. Please have some tea, mother. I don't want to argue today. I just want everything to stop. Quote. My mother looked at the tea without touching it and sneered, "You're really something. Setting up the whole table and chairs, and causing such a scene, only to say you don't want to argue. You want to force me to apologize, right?" Lan shook her head. No, I want you to call Track and ask him to take down the post and issue a correction. After that, I won't pursue the matter of you sending people to ruin the business today. As for the debt to Uncle Quan, let's set up a clear repayment plan. Pay the right amount on the right day, and no one will make it hard for anyone else. My mother froze. Perhaps she didn't expect Lan to mention not pursuing the matter. I immediately added, because this time, I know I cannot let my wife stand alone anymore. Mother, this is the last chance to keep everything within the family. If you don't stop, I will be the one to hand the evidence over to the authorities. My mother looked at me in disbelief, her eyes reddening, her voice trembling with anger. You are threatening your own mother, just for this woman? I took a deep breath. No, I am not threatening you. I am asking you to stop before there is no one left who can save you. If you are wrong, I cannot remain silent as I did before. My father-in-law took a blank sheet of paper and wrote down 3 conditions. Remove the post, cut ties with Track, and set up a debt repayment plan. He set the pen down and said, Mrs. Bitch, whether you sign or not is your right, but from this moment on, everything said is being recorded. We are giving you a way out, but we are not giving you the right to continue harming my daughter. My mother looked around, while Lan remained calm. Quan bowed his head, and I stood beside my wife. My parents-in-law were not harsh, but they were very clear. Finally, my mother picked up the phone, her hands trembling as she dialed Track's number. Before calling, she shot Lan a hateful glare. That look made me realize she wasn't truly remorseful at all. She was only backing down because she was backed into a corner. The phone rang a couple of times before the other end picked up. My mother tried to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Track, it's me. Quote, about that post, please take it down for me. I don't want to do this anymore." The whole place went dead silent. I looked at Lan and saw she had already turned on the recording on her phone. No one knew what Track would say, but my gut told me that man wouldn't easily let go of the prey he had been targeting for so long. The other end was silent for a few seconds, just a few seconds, but I felt as if the entire courtyard was holding its breath. My mother held the phone, her hand trembling slightly, yet she tried to keep her voice firm. "Mr. Track, that post can end here. Please take it down. I don't want to blow this up any further." A soft chuckle echoed from the speakerphone. The man's voice on the other end wasn't loud, but it sounded very cold. "Mrs. Bitch, do you think this is a marketplace? You open up shop when you want, and shut it down when you want?" My mother froze. "What do you mean by that? I only asked you to scare her a little. Now I'm telling you to stop, so you stop." Track laughed, even colder than before. "Scare her a little? You clearly texted me that you wanted to make sure that business could never get back on its feet. Quote, I hired writers, ran comments, and set up fake customer accounts. I've already spent the money. Now you tell me to stop. Who's going to pay me back?" My mother's face turned pale instantly. She looked around as if seeking support, but no one spoke up to help her. Standing right there, listening to every word, a chill ran down my spine. Track not only confirmed he was behind the smear campaign but also inadvertently exposed exactly how much my mother had actively assisted. My mother stammered. I didn't sign anything with you. Don't talk nonsense. I was just telling you about family matters." Track let out a huff. "You didn't sign anything, but you texted me everything. You said she made you lose face and told me to deal with it however I wanted, as long as that workshop didn't stay quiet. You even sent me photos of the yard, the signs, and the product crates. Do you want me to send them back to your daughter-in-law to see now?" My mother was speechless. Din Quan covered his face with his hands, and I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. I looked at my mother, my heart aching so much I couldn't speak. If it were just angry words spoken in the heat of the moment, it could be called a loss of composure, but sending photos and directing an outsider to attack your own daughter-in-law's business is no slip of the tongue. Lan sat still, placing the phone that was recording next to her teacup, her eyes fixed on the table. I didn't see her cry, but that silence frightened me more than any weeping could. Because I knew that something in her heart regarding her husband's family had truly collapsed. Track continued speaking, his voice revealing more and more smugness. "To be honest, you were just an excuse. I've had my eye on this mock land brand for a long time. Your daughter-in-law is just too stubborn. Sell it to me peacefully, or I'll let it collapse on its own. Public opinion is already turning. A few more posts and the agents will all drop out. By then, even if she wants to sell, she'll have to sell it for cheap." Lan looked up, and for the first time since the call began, she spoke. "Mr. Track, if you wanted to buy the brand, you could have come to discuss it properly. Why resort to such cowardly methods?" The person on the other end faltered, likely not expecting Lan to be listening. He laughed. "Oh, Ms. Lan is there too? Good. I'll put it bluntly. Within 24 hours, you signed the papers to transfer mock land household to me for a third of the price I offered last time. If not, tomorrow I'll release evidence of customers having allergic reactions, moldy products, and add a few workers to claim they were cheated out of their wages. If you want to resist, go ahead." Ms. Mui covered her mouth with her hand. The women in the workshop standing nearby stirred, some so scared their eyes turned red. I understood their fear. A small business with no media team and no money for major advertising can lose all its customers just from a few smears spreading quickly. People don't need to know the truth right away. They only need to be suspicious, and that's enough. My father-in-law lowered his voice. "You are blackmailing us." Track sneered. "Old man, don't be so harsh. I'm just giving your daughter a smart choice. Keep a hollow reputation and starve, or sell it to someone who knows how to make it big." Quote. Din Quan suddenly slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Shut up. If you want to collect your debt from me, do it. If you want to deal with me, go ahead, but don't touch my sister-in-law or the women in the workshop." Quote. Track immediately mocked him. "A debtor like you wants to talk about integrity? Focus on paying your debts first." That hit a raw nerve for Quan. He bowed his head. I thought he would stay silent, but a few seconds later he looked up, his voice raspy yet clear. Yes, I was wrong, I was greedy, I was stupid, and that's why I'm in debt, but I won't let others use my mistakes to harm the person who saved me. Quote, I owe money, so I will pay it back, but you are destroying the livelihood of honest people, and you will have to pay too. Lan turned to look at Quan. Her eyes softened ever so slightly, not forgiving him immediately, but acknowledging his stand. I saw it clearly, and my heart felt both happy and sad. Happy that my younger brother was finally starting to stand on the right side. Sad because I, as the husband, had woken up later than he did. My mother slumped into her chair, the phone still in her hand, but she seemed to have no strength left to hold it. With a trembling voice, she told Track, don't drag me into this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Take the post down. Track responded coldly, it's too late, Ms. Bitch. You handed me the knife, so don't ask why there's blood on it now. If you want me to stop, tell your daughter-in-law to sign the papers, otherwise, get ready to watch that workshop close down. Quote. Having said that, he hung up. The dry beeping sound echoed from the speaker, hitting the chest of everyone sitting there with every pulse. No one said anything for a long time, then my mother suddenly burst into tears. But those tears didn't sound like repentance. They sounded like the panic of someone who just realized they had been used. She muttered, I just wanted her to be afraid. I never wanted it to end up like this. I looked at my mother, my heart aching, but I was no longer as soft as I used to be. I understand that without this recording today, and without witnesses, she would likely keep denying everything. Lan slowly picked up her phone to save the audio file. She said to her father, Dad, we need to keep all the messages, calls, posts, and comments. We don't need to act in a rush, but from now on, everything must have evidence. Quote, my father-in-law nodded, right, to protect ourselves, we must stay alert. I looked at my wife. At that moment, she was no longer just a woman staying home to look after the child. She was standing in the middle of a real storm, yet remained calm enough to shield our child, protect our staff, and even leave an exit for her mother-in-law. As for me, I just stood there, feeling I owed her so much. I stepped forward and whispered, Lan, this time I won't leave you alone. She looked at me for a long time and replied, I don't need you to say that just to sound good. I need you to do what's right, even if the person at fault is your mother. I nodded, my throat tightening. I understood. Outside, the New Year's afternoon wind blew through the undelivered packages, making the shop sign rattle. Track had just issued a 24-hour ultimatum. And we knew that from that moment on, this battle was no longer just Lan's personal affair. It was the final test of my kindness, my awakening, and my worthiness as a husband. After Track hung up, no one in the house had the heart to finish our first day meal. The table was still full, the bowls and chopsticks clean, the soup still hot, but everyone's heart had turned cold. I looked at Lan standing quietly by the table, one hand holding her phone, the other resting on the order ledger. That stance didn't look weak at all, yet it made my heart ache with pity. A woman who just gave birth, who should have been resting this Tet, now had to stand up against a storm brought on by her husband's own family. I couldn't hold back anymore and said bluntly, Lan, let's make it all public. The recording, my mother's messages, the blackmail attempt, let's put it all out there. Whoever is wrong must face the consequences. I said that because I was both angry and eager to make amends. I thought that clearing things up for the public would be the fastest way to protect Lan. But Lan shook her head, looked at my mother sitting listlessly on the porch, and said, if we expose everything, the truth will come out, but your mother will be shamed for the rest of her life. Can you handle that? Will our children be able to handle it later on? Quote, I choked up. I had thought about justice, thought about venting my anger, but I hadn't looked far enough to see the price the whole family would pay if things went too far. Lan continued, her voice slow but very firm. I won't forgive easily, nor will I forget what your mother did, but I don't want to win by using the shame of a loved one as a weapon. Let's deal with the one who deliberately sabotaged us. As for your mother, I want to give her a chance to reflect, at least this time. I stood still, feeling a bitter lump in my throat. Sometimes, the person who is hurt is the one who behaves the most decently, and me, who once claimed to be a reasonable man, only knew how to be angry and seek satisfaction. My father-in-law nodded. He took out pen and paper and said, Lan is right, we don't hurt our own family for satisfaction, but we must deal properly with outsiders who take advantage to ruin the villagers' livelihood. He called an acquaintance who worked as a legal advisor in town. Soon after, that person gave clear instructions. Save the posts, screenshot comments, record order losses, keep audio recordings, and make a list of workers who are fully paid. I immediately went with the workers group in the yard, from Aunt Tam who sands wooden trays, Sister Lean who sews cloth bags, to Uncle Wah who weaves bamboo blinds. Everyone was ready to sign the confirmation. They didn't just sign to protect their jobs, but also out of care for Lan. Aunt Tam held the pen with a trembling hand. Fuck, dear, I don't know many words. Please write it for me. Write that Lan has never stiffed anyone out of money. There was a month I was sick and she even advanced me money for medicine. Sister Lean added. My 2 kids can go to school thanks to Lan's orders. Anyone saying she exploits people as being immoral. Those words made me bow my head. Strangers can see my wife's kindness so clearly, yet after all these years, I only ever saw a woman stuck at home. Lan didn't stand there listening to the praise. She sat at the wooden table, drafting a short correction. No insults, no venting, and certainly no mention of my mother. She only posted photos of the workflow, timesheets, payment records, finished products, and honest feedback from previous customers. At the end of the post, she wrote, "We don't argue with harsh words. We only wish to prove ourselves through our products and how we treat those who work with us." As soon as the post went up, everyone in the workshop began sharing it, and regular customers started leaving comments. Some shared how they'd been buying from Mock Land for 2 years. Others said the products were durable and well packaged, and some even posted photos of their candy trays on their altars, saying, "Quality products speak for themselves." I watched the comments start to shift and felt a sense of relief, but Lan didn't let her guard down. She said this wouldn't end with just one post. Once someone like him makes a move, he'll find a way to create fake evidence. Sure enough, just over an hour later, 2 strangers, a man and a woman, appeared at the gate, phones already out and recording. The woman stepped inside and shouted, "I bought products here that were moldy, and today I've come to get my money back." I stepped out immediately, keeping my voice soft. "Could you please give me your order code, the purchase date, and photos of the product? If it is indeed a defective item, the workshop will handle it fully." The woman hesitated for a moment but continued to raise her voice. "You dishonest people are still asking for an order code? I'm filming this so everyone can see." Lan walked out from the house and calmly said, "Go ahead and film, but please make sure to record both what you say and our responses. We have cameras here. If you aren't telling the truth, we also have the right to protect ourselves." The man with her immediately darted his eyes around the room. I noticed he was holding a black plastic bag, revealing several moldy trays that looked nothing like the designs Mock Land sells. Lan demanded he open the bag to inspect it in front of everyone. The woman adamantly refused. Din Quan quickly noticed a folded piece of paper fall from the man's jacket pocket. He picked it up, opened it, and stood frozen. On the paper were scripts for every line about the moldy, allergic products. The shop owner denying responsibility, filming close-ups of the workers. Below that was a note saying to speak as loudly as possible to draw the neighbors out. The whole yard went silent. The woman turned pale, and the man tried to grab the paper, but Quan stepped back. Lan looked at them, her voice not loud but very clear. "I don't know who hired you, but if you walk out of here today and stop, I won't make things difficult. But if you continue to slander me, I will invite the local police to file a report." The woman trembled, finally bowing her head. We were just hired. They told us to film the clip and they'd send the money, so I asked immediately, "Who hired you?" She bit her lip, not daring to speak, but her evasive eyes were enough for everyone to understand. Lan didn't gloat. She just told Quan to photograph the paper, save the footage, and let them leave after deleting the unposted clips. The way she handled it was decisive yet left them a way out. I stood beside her, for the first time understanding what it means to be strong without being bitter. That afternoon, Lan's clarification post continued to spread even further, while the evidence of the fake customers was kept safe. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, I saw that Lan no longer had to stand alone. Beside her were me, Quan, my in-laws, and the people she had once treated with kindness. And I understood that if kindness is practiced long enough, it becomes the sturdiest shield in times of trouble. Not long after the woman posing as a customer left the yard, my father-in-law decided to invite the village head and the local police to file a report. He stated clearly that he did not hit or detain anyone, but the fact that others were hired to slander them needed to be recorded, not for revenge, but to protect themselves later. Hearing that, I nodded. This time, I was no longer impulsive, demanding to blast everything onto the internet. I realized that to go the distance, you must lead with evidence, not with anger. About half an hour later, the village head arrived with 2 commune police officers. They reviewed the security footage, examined the paper with a prepared slanderous script, and listened to Lan recount everything from the start. She spoke very coherently, without adding a single insulting word about my mother, nor trying to drag family matters into it. She focused only on the fact that Track hired people to smear her, spread false information, and cause damage to the business. Standing nearby, I felt both pity and admiration. If it were someone else, after being sabotaged by their mother-in-law time and again, they surely would have taken this chance to expose her. But Lan did not do that. She clearly distinguishes between outsiders intentionally profiting and family members making mistakes that need to be handled differently. That very clarity makes me realize I still have so much to learn from my wife. After watching the footage, one officer asked if the person who came to cause trouble earlier was related to the man named Track. Lan played the recording of the earlier call, where Track's voice rang out clearly. Every word of extortion and every threat to force her to hand over the brand was caught in full. Upon hearing the part where he mentioned hiring people to write posts, manage comments, and prepare fake accounts, the village head frowned deeply. This was no longer just a typical business dispute. He stated there were clear signs of slander, intimidation, and sabotage of business operations. He said, "The family should provide all the evidence, and we will forward it to the authorities to handle according to regulations." Just then, the man who had posed as a customer earlier suddenly returned with the woman. The 2 of them kept their heads down, looking fearful. They said that after leaving, Track called to curse at them, threatened to withhold payment, and even forced them to return to film another clip. Trembling, the woman held out her phone. "We were wrong. We took money to do bad things. In here, there are still messages from Mr. Track telling us to say the goods were moldy and that we had an allergic reaction." The messages were clearly displayed line by line, including the payment amount and the demand to film close-ups of Lan's face to incite viewers. An officer immediately took photos of the screen. The man sheepishly added that Track also told them if they were caught red-handed, they should blame it on a customer's spontaneous frustration and absolutely never mention his name. The more I listened, the more I felt a chill down my spine. A person driven by greed and money can stage an entire dirty act just to destroy the hard work of others. But what made everyone freeze was when the woman whispered, "Track also said someone from Lan's husband's family tipped him off." That person said Lan was afraid of losing face for her husband's family and wouldn't dare make a scene. No names were needed, everyone knew who it was. My mother sat in the corner of the porch, drained of all color. I turned to look at my mother. At this moment, I no longer felt the burning anger I had at the start. Deep inside, there was only a profound sense of pain. Pain because the woman who gave birth to me had let her pride lead her this far astray. Pain because she thought she was protecting her son's dignity, but in reality, she made her son look like he couldn't defend his wife and left our home vulnerable to outsiders. Lan looked at my mother and then turned to the police officer. She spoke about the parts involving Track and the group of hired people. "I request that you handle them according to the law, but for my mother-in-law, I would like to settle it within the family first. If this happens again in the future, I will provide full evidence." The whole yard went quiet. My mother snapped her head up, her eyes filled with shock and shame. Perhaps she never thought Lan would choose not to expose her in front of outsiders. She asked with a trembling voice, "Why? Why are you still covering for me?" Lan looked at her, no longer calling her mother with the same softness as before. But she wasn't harsh either, because she is still my son's grandmother. Because I don't want my son to grow up in a story where adults only know how to destroy one another. But you must listen carefully, this is the final time. If you harm my family again, I will not cover for you a second time. My mother hung her head low, her shoulders trembling. For the first time since this morning, she didn't argue, didn't scold, and didn't blame anyone. She collapsed onto the wooden chair, buried her face in her hands, and let out a faint sob. I was wrong. I thought I was keeping face for our family. It turns out I was the one who crushed it with my own hands. I stood there, my eyes stinging. I didn't know if I should help my mother up. A part of me is still her son, still feeling pain seeing my mother fall apart. But the rest understood that there are falls one must feel painful enough to wake up from. Din Quan stepped in front of Lan and my parents-in-law. He suddenly knelt down. This time, it wasn't out of fear, but sincerity. "Sister Lan, Mom, Dad, I apologize. If I hadn't been greedy for profit and fallen into debt, Mom wouldn't have had to run around like that. Things wouldn't have turned out this way. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness, just a chance to repay my debt with my own labor." My father-in-law sighed and reached out to pull Kwon up. "If you realize your mistake and fix it, you're still family, but remember from now on, no one can live your life for you forever. If you want to pay off your debt, come to the workshop after Tet. Start with sanding, packing, and delivering. Your wages will be deducted from the debt. Do it if you can, no one is forcing you." Kwon nodded continuously, tears falling onto the back of his hands. "I'll do it, I'll do any job." Lan looked at Kwon for a moment, then said, "If you come to the workshop, work like everyone else. Don't expect lighter tasks just because you're my brother-in-law, and don't torment yourself just because you made a mistake. Quote, just work properly and pay it off little by little." Those words weren't sweet, but they were kind, giving Kwon a path to correct his mistakes without dragging him through the mud. As for the culprit, the evidence against him was clearly documented. The smear posts were ordered to be taken down, fake accounts were recorded, and the hired person confessed. Before leaving, the village chief said that honest business people have nothing to fear, but those who use dirty tricks to harm others will sooner or later get caught in their own traps. My mother stood up very slowly. She walked up to Lan, her lips trembling. After a long while, she finally managed to speak. "I apologize, if you still allow me to call you my daughter-in-law." Lan replied immediately. She just took her child from her mother's arms, looked at the sleeping baby, and whispered, "I can't forget this right away, but from today on, I hope you won't let your grandchild witness adults hurting each other anymore." My mother burst into tears. I turned away, not wanting anyone to see that my eyes were also red. That first day of Tet, the courtyard at my in-laws' house was no longer as bustling as it was when I first arrived. But amidst the ruins, I saw something beginning to be rebuilt, not with promises, but with truth, responsibility, and belated acts of contrition. After that first day of the year, things could not simply go back to the way they were. There are cracks that, no matter how hard one tries to cover them, remain as deep, visible scars. But at least from that day on, no one in my family could pretend that none of it had ever happened. Track was forced to remove all defamatory posts and issue a public retraction. Those he hired confessed to being paid to fabricate stories, and the threatening messages pressuring Lan to sell her brand were filed as evidence. Subsequently, Track's facility was further investigated, as many other artisans had accused him of copying designs, price gouging, and spreading rumors when they refused to sell. Those who try to shatter others' livelihoods often end up breaking their own. It wasn't a noisy gloating, but rather a quiet, yet well-deserved price to pay. My mother was not taken to court because Lan left her a way out. But that way out was not for her to continue doing wrong. In front of both families, my mother signed a pledge to stop slandering, stop interfering in Lan's work, and stop using filial piety to pressure my wife and me. She also joined me and Din Kwon in planning to repay the 180 million to my in-laws within a year. On the day she signed the papers, Mom took off the gold bracelet she always boasted was her retirement nest egg. Placing it on the table, she said very softly, "Sell this first to pay back a portion to the in-laws." My whole life, I was so afraid of being looked down on for being poor that I looked down on others first. It turns out the poorest one was me. Hearing that, a lump formed in my throat. For the first time, I saw Mom stop trying to win. She was just an aging woman. After years of clinging to her pride, she finally realized she had hurt too many people. Lan did not rush to forgive. She didn't say flowery words to put everyone at ease either. She just looked at my mother and replied, "I don't need you to love me right away. I just hope that from now on, Mom won't use filial piety to force others to endure humiliation." My mother bowed her head, tears falling onto the back of her hands. No one clapped, no one spoke any grand words of reconciliation. But in that silence, I knew a small door had been opened. After Tet, Din Kwon really came to work at the workshop. He started by sanding pieces of wood, packing boxes, and delivering goods. At first, he was very clumsy, bending the straps and sticking labels crookedly, getting scolded by the women in the workshop until he blushed, but he didn't quit. Every evening when he came home, his hands were raw and red from sawdust, his shirt shoulders stained, yet he only smiled, saying he once thought doing business meant being slick. Now I understand that to last, one must be kind first. I also learned, bit by bit, within my own home. I learned how to hold our child when Lan was busy, how to ask what she needed help with without waiting for her to speak up. I learned to view my wife's job as real work, not just a hobby to keep her hands busy. Some nights, sitting next to Lan as she checked orders, watching her calculate wages for the workers, I realized my wife's success didn't make me any smaller. It was my own selfishness in the past that made me small. My mother gradually spoke less. She no longer came over to criticize Lan like before. One time, seeing Lan packing orders late at night, she quietly made a pot of ginger tea, placed it on the table, and walked out. Lan looked at the teapot without saying anything, but she didn't push it away either. Changes in a family are sometimes just that small. Not dramatic, no tears, but enough to let people know someone is trying to change. A year later, on the first day of Tet, I took my wife and child to her parents' house again. This time, my mother and Din Kwan were also in the car. The atmosphere was no longer as heavy as the previous year. My son could now call for grandma, mom, and dad. He chatted away throughout the trip. Lan sat next to me, her hand resting lightly on the gift bag. She didn't turn her face away like the year before, but she didn't act as if everything was completely forgotten either. I understood that some wounds need more time than just an apology. As the car pulled up to my mother-in-law's courtyard, the Mock Lan sign was still hanging there, but the yard looked much neater and more spacious. The women in the workshop were off for Tet, leaving only a few pots of yellow chrysanthemums on either side of the porch. My mother stepped out of the car, clutching a basket of fruit. She stood before the gate for a long time before entering, placing the fruit basket on Lan's ancestral altar. She turned to my wife's parents, her voice trembling. Last year I came here to demand respect, but this year I have come to repay a debt of gratitude. My father-in-law looked at her and gave a slight nod. My mother-in-law poured a cup of hot tea and pushed it toward her. It's Tet now, have some tea to warm up. We should remember the past to fix things, not to dwell on the pain forever. Lan stood beside me, holding our child in her arms. She didn't cry, she just gave a small nod to my mother. It was a very slight nod, but for our family, it was something truly precious. Din Kwan was out in the yard helping my father-in-law hang the lanterns, laughing as he worked. Watching that scene, my eyes suddenly stung. I reached out and took Lan's hand. 1 second, 2 seconds, she didn't pull away. Very gently, she squeezed my hand back, needing no further promises. I understood that we still had much to learn and many days to live kindly to make up for old wounds. But at least we had chosen to move forward with truth, not with pride. There are women who don't need to be praised for their brilliance, nor do they need grand gifts to prove love. They only need that when they quietly support the whole family, the person beside them doesn't take it for granted. Because in marriage, what hurts most is sometimes not poverty, but having given your all only to be overlooked by your own loved ones. Yeah,